He stood in full dress blues, a chest heavy with medals, hands raised in the air. To the officer pointing the gun, he was just a threat. To the United States Pentagon, he was a lethal asset and a national hero. But on a dusty roadside in rural Alabama, none of that mattered. What started as a routine gas station stop spiraled into a chaotic arrest that would shatter a corrupt police department, trigger a massive federal investigation, and end with a judge delivering a staggering 58-year prison sentence. They thought they were arresting a suspect. They didn't know they were waking a sleeping giant. This is the story of how arrogance met consequences. The relentless humidity of an Alabama July clung to the air, thick and suffocating, as Commander Isaiah Sterling pulled his pristine, black Ford F-150 into the pump at Miller's Crossing, a lone gas station halfway between nowhere and Mobile. Isaiah wasn't just a motorist passing through. He was a Tier 1 operator, a Navy SEAL with 16 years of service, 6 combat deployments, and a clearance level higher than most politicians. Today, however, he wasn't wearing his tactical gear. He was in his service dress blues, the high collar, the gold buttons catching the harsh sun, and the rows of ribbons that told the story of Fallujah, the Hindu Kush, and operations that would never make the evening news. He had just come from a funeral in Atlanta for a fallen brother, a Master Chief who had saved his life twice. Isaiah was tired, grieving, and just wanted to get home to his wife, Sarah, and their 2 daughters. He stepped out of the truck, the polished leather of his shoes crunching on the gravel. He didn't look like the locals. He stood 6'4", a wall of muscle and discipline, his face stoic but eyes sharp, scanning his surroundings out of habit. Inside the station, behind the grimy glass, the clerk, an elderly woman named Martha, watched him with wide eyes. It wasn't often she saw a man who looked like a recruiting poster, but across the street, sitting in an idling patrol car obscured by a billboard, Officer Brett Harrison saw something else entirely. Harrison was a 4-year veteran of the sleepy Creekwood Police Department. He was known around the precinct as a hothead, the type of cop who peaked in high school football and used his badge to demand the respect he couldn't earn naturally. He was bored, he was agitated from the heat, and he was looking for a reason to assert authority. "Look at this guy," Harrison muttered to his rookie partner, Officer Kyle Dunning. "Flashy truck, Navy uniform, middle of nowhere." "He's probably just getting gas, Brett," Dunning said, shifting uncomfortably. Dunning was new, only 3 months on the job, and he already knew Harrison had a reputation for fishing, stopping people for no reason other than gut instinct and prejudice. "Nah," Harrison shifted the cruiser into drive. "That uniform looks fake. Too many medals. Probably one of those stolen valor creeps trying to get a discount or scamming people. Plus, does he look like a commander to you? I'm checking it out." As Isaiah finished pumping gas, he felt the presence before he saw it, the creeping sensation of being watched that had kept him alive in sniper alleys overseas. He turned slowly as the cruiser rolled up, lights flashing silently, blocking his truck in. Harrison stepped out, hand resting prominently on his holster. He didn't adjust his hat or offer a greeting. He just chewed his gum aggressively, his sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Step away from the vehicle," Harrison barked, his voice cracking with artificial intensity. Isaiah paused, the fuel nozzle still in his hand. He placed it back in the pump calmly. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I said step away from the vehicle," Harrison shouted, unclipping the safety strap on his holster. "And keep your hands where I can see them." Isaiah took a breath. He had faced Taliban warlords with more diplomatic grace than this. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands open and visible. "My hands are visible, officer. I'm Commander Sterling, United States Navy. I'm just refueling to head home." Harrison scoffed, closing the distance, invading Isaiah's personal space. The smell of stale coffee and aggression radiated off the cop. "Commander, huh? You expect me to believe that? You look like you bought that costume at a Spirit Halloween store. Where'd you steal the truck?" "The truck is registered in my name," Isaiah said, his voice a low, controlled rumble. "My military ID is in my front pocket. If you let me reach for it—" "Don't you move!" Harrison drew his weapon, leveling it at Isaiah's chest. Inside the gas station, Martha gasped and dropped her phone. Outside, a few other travelers froze. One teenager, a kid named Leo, sitting on the hood of his car while his parents were inside, quietly pulled out his smartphone and hit record. "Officer," Isaiah said, his eyes locking onto the barrel of the gun. He didn't flinch. "You are pointing a loaded firearm at a commissioned officer of the United States Navy. You need to lower your weapon and de-escalate this situation immediately." "Shut your mouth!" Harrison screamed, his face flushing red. He felt small next to Sterling's imposing stature, and that insecurity fueled his rage. "Get on the ground. Now, face down." "I have done nothing wrong," Isaiah stated firmly. "I am not getting on the ground in my dress uniform for a routine traffic stop that hasn't even been justified." "Resisting arrest," Harrison yelled, glancing back at Dunning, who looked terrified and hadn't drawn his weapon. "Dunning, get over here. Cover me." "Brett, he's a commander," Dunning stammered, walking forward tentatively. "Look at the insignia. That's real gold." "It's fake," Harrison spat. He holstered his gun and grabbed his taser. "Last warning, tough guy. Get on the ground or I light you up." Isaiah looked at the taser, then at Harrison. He calculated the distance. He could have disarmed Harrison, broken his wrist, and incapacitated Dunning in under 3 seconds. It would have been muscle memory. But Isaiah knew the war he was fighting right now wasn't physical. It was legal. If he fought back, he died, or he went to prison. If he complied, he surrendered his dignity, but he kept his life and his leverage. "I am complying under duress," Isaiah said loudly. For the benefit of the camera, he spotted the teenager holding. "I am lowering myself to the ground." Slowly, painfully, Isaiah knelt on the dirty, oil-stained concrete. The gravel bit into his pristine trousers. He placed his hands behind his head. Harrison rushed forward, kneeing Isaiah in the back with unnecessary force, driving the breath from his lungs. He grabbed Isaiah's wrists and cranked them back, slapping the cuffs on tight. Too tight. "Gotcha now, stolen valor piece of trash," Harrison whispered in his ear. Isaiah closed his eyes, the humiliation burning hotter than the sun. "You have no idea," he thought. "You have absolutely no idea what you just started." The back of the patrol car smelled of vomit and pine air freshener. Isaiah sat awkwardly, his large frame cramped against the plastic divider, his hands losing circulation in the cuffs behind his back. Harrison drove with a manic energy, swerving slightly as he sped toward the precinct. He was on the radio, bragging to dispatch. "Yeah, got a big one. Impersonating a military officer, resisting arrest, suspected grand theft auto. He's big, but he went down like a sack of potatoes." Isaiah stared out the window at the passing pine trees. He began to catalogue everything. Time of arrest, 14:35. Officer name, B. Harrison. Badge Nashba 402. Probable cause, none articulated. Use of force, excessive. "You quiet back there now, huh?" Harrison taunted, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Where's all that commander talk now?" "I have a right to make a phone call," Isaiah said, calmly. "You'll get your call when I say you get your call. We gotta process you first. Got to see if you have warrants. I bet your sheet is a mile long." They arrived at the Creekwood police station, a small brick building that had seen better days. Harrison yanked Isaiah out of the car, parading him through the front doors. The desk sergeant, an older man named Sergeant Miller, looked up over his spectacles. His jaw dropped when he saw the uniform. "Harrison?" Miller said slowly. "What in the hell is this?" "Stolen valor, Sarge." Harrison beamed. Caught him at Miller's Crossing. Fake uniform, fancy truck, resisted arrest. Miller squinted at Isaiah. He had served in the Marines in the late 80s. He knew how to spot a fake uniform. He looked at the ribbon rack, the silver star, the bronze star with V device, the purple heart, the trident. Everything was spaced to the millimeter. The tailoring was bespoke. "Harrison." Miller stood up, a cold knot forming in his stomach. "Did you check his ID?" "Not yet. He kept reaching for it, so I took him down." "Check it." "Now." Harrison rolled his eyes and dug into Isaiah's pocket, pulling out a slim, black leather wallet. He flipped it open. He pulled out the Common Access card, CAC. He looked at it. He looked closer. He flipped it over. The room went silent. The air conditioning hum sounded like a jet engine. It looks real," Harrison mumbled, the color draining from his face. "Give me that." Miller snatched the ID. He swiped it through the reader on his desk. The system lagged for a second, then populated the screen. "Access level, top secret, SEI rank, 05 Commander. Status, active duty, naval special warfare." Miller looked at the screen, then at Isaiah, then at Harrison. "Harrison, take the cuffs off, right now." But Sarge, he resisted. "Take them off!" Miller roared, his face turning purple. Harrison fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking. He unlocked the cuffs. Isaiah rubbed his wrists, where deep red grooves had formed. He stood up to his full height, adjusting his jacket, brushing the dust off his knees. He looked at Miller. "I need a secure line," Isaiah said, "and I need to speak to the JAG Corps." "Commander," Miller said, his voice trembling, "I am terribly sorry. This is a misunderstanding. My officer here—" "This was not a misunderstanding, Sergeant." Isaiah cut him off, his voice ice cold. "This was an assault. This was kidnapping. And this was a violation of my civil rights. Your officer pointed a loaded weapon at a federal agent without cause." "We can fix this," Harrison interjected, panic setting in. "We can just drop the charges. You walk out. No harm done." Isaiah turned to Harrison slowly. "You think you can unring this bell? You humiliated me. You stripped me of my freedom. You desecrated this uniform." "I was just doing my job," Harrison yelled, defensive again. "You fit the description." "What description?" Isaiah stepped closer. "A black man in a nice car?" Harrison didn't answer. The silence was deafening. "I want my phone," Isaiah said. Miller handed it over. Isaiah didn't call his wife. He didn't call a local lawyer. He dialed a number that very few people possessed. "Pentagon, Special Operations Command," a crisp voice answered on the second ring. "This is Commander Isaiah Sterling, ID Alpha X-Ray 19904. Code Black. Go ahead, Commander." "I have been unlawfully detained by local law enforcement in Creekwood, Alabama. I was held at gunpoint. I have been assaulted. I am currently being held at the Creekwood precinct. The hostel is Officer Brett Harrison. I require immediate JAG intervention and federal oversight." "Understood, Commander. Are you safe right now?" "I am unsecured, but hostile elements are present." "Hold position. We are contacting the nearest FBI field office in Mobile and the Judge Advocate General. Do not say another word to them. Help is coming." Isaiah hung up. He looked at Harrison, who was now sweating profusely. "You better pray," Isaiah whispered, "because the United States government is about to fall on your head." But Harrison wasn't done being stupid. Panic makes people do irrational things. He looked at Miller. Sarge, we can't let him make that call. If he brings the feds in, we're cooked. He already made the call, you idiot, Miller shouted. No. Harrison's eyes went wild. We book him. We book him for assault on an officer. We say he attacked me. My word against his. Dunning will back me up. Dunning, who was standing by the door, shook his head vigorously. No way, Brett. I'm not lying for you. He didn't touch you. You traitor! Harrison lunged toward Dunning, but Miller grabbed him. This is over, Harrison. Go to my office. No. Harrison pulled away. He turned to Isaiah. You listen to me, boy. You might know people in Washington. But down here, I am the law. I say you attacked me. And in this county, a jury will believe a local cop over a stranger any day. Isaiah just smiled, a terrifying, calm smile. You really don't get it. You aren't fighting a stranger. You're fighting the machine. And by the time they are done with you, you won't even be able to get a job as a mall cop. Suddenly, the phone on Sergeant Miller's desk rang. It wasn't the regular line. It was the red emergency line that connected directly to the state dispatch. Miller picked it up. His face went pale. He looked at Harrison. It's the governor's office, Miller whispered. They want to know why a Navy SEAL commander is being held in our jail. The video from the gas station had just hit the internet, and it had already gone viral. The atmosphere inside the Creekwood precinct shifted from tense to suffocating in the span of 30 minutes. The air conditioning was humming, but Sergeant Miller was sweating through his uniform. The phone hadn't stopped ringing. First the governor's office, then the local news station, and finally, a terrifyingly polite call from the office of the Judge Advocate General in Washington, D.C. Isaiah Sterling sat in a chair in the break room. Miller hadn't dared put him back in a holding cell, sipping a cup of water. He looked remarkably calm for a man who had been assaulted and handcuffed an hour prior. He checked his watch. They're making good time, he murmured. Who? Miller asked, his voice cracking. The cleaners, Isaiah said, not looking up. Outside, the sound of gravel crunching under heavy tires drew everyone's attention. It wasn't one car, it was a convoy. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans with tinted windows screeched to a halt in front of the station, flanked by 2 Alabama State Trooper vehicles. Doors flew open. Men and women in sharp business suits poured out, moving with a synchronized predatory grace. Leading them was Special Agent Thomas Reynolds of the FBI, a man known in the Bureau for dismantling organized crime syndicates in Chicago before transferring south. He adjusted his tie, checked his sidearm, and pushed through the precinct's double doors without knocking. The lobby fell silent. Reynolds walked straight to the desk, flanked by 2 other agents and a woman in a Navy dress uniform, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Holloway, a JAG attorney with a reputation for being a shark in the courtroom. Where is Commander Sterling? Reynolds asked. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice carried the weight of federal authority. He's in the break room, Miller stammered, standing up. I don't care what you were just doing, Reynolds cut him off. You are to step away from your desk. Keep your hands visible. Agent Cooper, secure the evidence room. Agent Wright, secure the server room. No data enters or leaves this building starting now. Officer Brett Harrison, who had been pacing in the back, stormed out. Hey, you can't just walk in here and take over. This is my precinct. That man back there is a suspect in... Reynolds turned slowly to face Harrison. He looked him up and down with a look of utter disgust. Officer Harrison, I presume? Yeah, that's me. And I demand. You are in no position to demand anything. Holloway stepped forward, her voice sharp as a razor. I am Lieutenant Commander Holloway. I represent the Department of the Navy. You are currently under investigation for the false imprisonment and assault of a highly decorated special warfare operator. If I were you, I would exercise my right to remain silent, because you have already dug a grave deep enough to bury this entire department." Harrison opened his mouth to argue, but Miller shouted, "Shut up, Brett! For God's sake, shut up!" Reynolds walked past them, pushing into the break room. He saw Isaiah and immediately softened his posture. "Commander Sterling, Agent Reynolds, FBI. We're here to get you out." Isaiah stood and shook his hand. "Took you long enough, Tom." "Traffic?" "Something like that," Reynolds smirked. "We have the dashcam footage." "The rookie Dunning has the keys to the cruiser," Isaiah said. "And the kid at the gas station recorded everything. It's already online." "We saw," Holloway said, handing Isaiah his cover hat. "It's everywhere, Isaiah. CNN is running it at the top of the hour. Fox is debating it. You're the most famous man in America right now." Isaiah put on his cover, adjusting it perfectly. "I don't want fame. I want justice." As they walked Isaiah out of the station, the scene outside had transformed. A crowd had gathered, locals who had seen the video, reporters who had raced from Mobile, and curious onlookers. When Isaiah stepped out, flanked by the FBI, cameras flashed in a blinding strobe. Harrison watched from the window, his face pale. He pulled his phone out and frantically dialed his union rep. "They're taking him. You gotta help me. They're gonna hang me out to dry." "Did you turn off your body cam?" the rep asked. "No. I forgot," Harrison whispered. "Then God help you, Brett. Because I can't." Before getting into the SUV, Isaiah stopped. He turned back to the precinct, locking eyes with Harrison through the glass. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just pointed a single finger at the building, then at the ground. "I am coming back, and I am bringing this down." As the convoy pulled away, Officer Dunning sat in his patrol car, his head in his hands. He looked at the dashcam system. The red light was still blinking. He knew Harrison would try to delete it the moment the feds looked away. Dunning made a choice. He ejected the SD card, slipped it into his sock, and walked back inside. He wasn't going down for this. 3 weeks had passed since the arrest. The gas station incident had dominated the news cycle for days. But as with all things, the media was starting to move on. Officer Harrison had been placed on administrative leave with pay, pending an internal investigation. The Creekwood Police Department released a statement calling it a regrettable failure of communication, trying to sweep the assault under the rug of bureaucracy. But Isaiah Sterling had not moved on. He sat in the mahogany-paneled office of Robert King, one of the most feared civil rights attorneys in the South. King was a large man with a booming voice and a mind like a steel trap. He had sued police departments in Atlanta, Birmingham, and New Orleans, and he had won millions. "They're offering a settlement," King said, tossing a folder onto the desk. "The city of Creekwood wants to pay you $200,000 to drop the civil suit and sign an NDA. They want this to go away, Isaiah." Isaiah didn't even look at the folder. "No. I told them you'd say that." King smiled, leaning back. "But here's the problem. The local district attorney, Bill Hennessy, is dragging his feet on the criminal charges. He and the police chief are golf buddies. He's going to try to reduce the charges to a misdemeanor, unlawful detention and give Harrison a slap on the wrist. Probation, no jail time." Isaiah's jaw tightened. He pointed a gun at my head. "He assaulted me." "I know," King said. "But in this county, a badge is a shield, unless we find something else, something bigger. We need to prove this wasn't a mistake. We need to prove it was a pattern." "Harrison called me stolen valor," Isaiah said, thinking back. "He was obsessed with the truck. He asked where I stole it. He was hungry." like he was looking for a prize. Asset forfeiture, King murmured. It's a legal way for cops to seize property suspected of being involved in a crime. In corrupt departments, it's legalized highway robbery. Just then, King's secretary buzzed in. "Mr. King, there's a young man here to see you. He says he's a police officer, Kyle Dunning." Isaiah and King exchanged a look. "Send him in," King said. Dunning looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a hoodie, and kept checking the window behind him. He sat down, refusing water. "If they know I'm here," Dunning said, his voice shaking, "I'm dead. Harrison has friends, not just cops, bad people." "Why are you here, Officer Dunning?" Isaiah asked gently. "Because I saw the internal report," Dunning said, pulling a crumpled paper from his pocket. "Harrison wrote that you lunged for his gun. He lied, and the chief signed off on it." "We know they're lying, son," King said. "That's not enough." "I have the dashcam SD card," Dunning said, placing the small plastic chip on the desk. "The original, unedited. But that's not all." Dunning took a deep breath. "Harrison has a storage unit, out on Route 9, Unit 4B. He calls it his toy box. He took me there once when I first started to show me the perks of the job." "What's in the box, Kyle?" Isaiah asked, leaning forward. "Everything," Dunning whispered. "Watches, cash, jewelry. Guns he confiscated but never logged into evidence. He targets out-of-towners, people passing through. He arrests them on bogus charges, seizes their property, and tells them if they sign over the property, he'll drop the charges. Most people just want to go home, so they sign. He's been doing it for 10 years. King picked up the SD card, his eyes gleaming. "This is it. This is the RICO case." "There's one more thing," Dunning said, tears welling in his eyes. "Last year, there was a college kid, a musician. He had a vintage Gibson guitar in his back seat. Harrison wanted it. He pulled the kid over. The kid argued. It got physical. The kid ended up in the hospital with a concussion from a fall. He died 2 days later from a brain bleed." Isaiah felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What was the kid's name?" "Ethan Cole," Dunning said. "They ruled it an accident. But Harrison has the guitar. It's in the unit." Isaiah stood up, the rage radiating off him in waves. This wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about a uniform or an insult. It was about a murderer hiding behind a badge. "Mr. King," Isaiah said, his voice low and dangerous. "Call Agent Reynolds. Tell him to get a warrant for that storage unit. We aren't just suing Harrison. We're going to bury him." King picked up the phone. "And the district attorney?" "If Hennessy tries to protect him after this," Isaiah said, heading for the door, "he goes to prison too." The twist had landed. It wasn't just police brutality. It was a highway robbery ring run by the very people sworn to protect the road. And they had just made the mistake of robbing the one man who had the power to burn their kingdom to the ground. As Isaiah walked out of the office, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Sarah," he said to his wife, "I'm not coming home tonight. I have a mission." "Is it dangerous?" she asked, used to this tone. "For me?" "No," Isaiah said, looking at the city skyline. "For them? It's the end of the world." The humid Alabama night was thick with mosquitoes and tension. It was 2 a.m. A surveillance drone, operated by the FBI, hovered silently 500 feet above Secure-It self-storage, off Route 9. Inside a command van parked a mile down the road, Agent Reynolds watched the thermal feed. Commander Isaiah Sterling stood behind him, arms crossed, his face illuminated by the green glow of the monitors. "He's moving," Reynolds said. "Target is entering the facility." Officer Harrison hadn't been able to sleep. A text from a friendly dispatcher had tipped him off that Dunning was talking to a lawyer. Harrison knew he had to purge the unit. He drove his personal truck, not a cruiser, and parked by the gate. He punched in his code. Harrison drove to Unit 4B. He jumped out, looking frantically left and right. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking violently. He threw open the corrugated metal door. Inside, stacked floor to ceiling, was the harvest of a decade of corruption. High-end flat-screen TVs, boxes of jewelry, designer handbags, power tools and cash bundles rubber-banded in plastic bins. And there, in the back corner, leaning against a stack of stolen tires, was a vintage Gibson Les Paul guitar case. "I gotta burn it," Harrison muttered to himself. "Gotta burn it all." He grabbed a can of gasoline from the back of his truck and began splashing it over the pile. The fumes filled the small space. He grabbed the guitar case last, intending to throw it into the bed of his truck to destroy elsewhere. "Do it now," Isaiah whispered in the van. "All units, move, move, move!" Reynolds barked into his headset. Floodlights from the perimeter fence, which had been rigged by the tactical team an hour ago, suddenly blazed to life, turning the night into blinding day. A loudspeaker boomed, shaking the metal walls of the storage units. "Brett Harrison! Federal agents! Drop the fuel can and show us your hands!" Harrison froze. He dropped the gas can. He squinted into the blinding light. For a split second, his hand twitched toward the pistol, tucked in his waistband. "Don't do it, Brett!" It was Dunning's voice, amplified over the speaker. "Don't die for this!" Harrison looked around, trapped. He saw the FBI SWAT team advancing in a phalanx, shields up, rifles trained on his chest. He saw the ATF agents. And then, walking calmly behind the shield wall, he saw Commander Sterling. Isaiah wasn't wearing body armor. He was wearing a crisp suit. He looked untouchable. Harrison slumped. The fight left him. He fell to his knees in the puddle of gasoline and raised his hands. As agents swarmed him, zip-tying his wrists and dragging him away from the flammable evidence, Reynolds and Isaiah walked into the unit. Reynolds whistled low. "My God, there must be $500,000 of merchandise in here." Isaiah walked straight to the guitar case. He picked it up gently and unlatched it. Inside lay a beautiful sunburst Gibson Les Paul. Tucked into the strings was a laminated photo of a young man smiling on a stage. On the back of the photo, written in marker, "Property of Ethan Cole. If found, please return to Mom." Isaiah closed the case, his eyes hard. He walked out to where Harrison was being shoved into the back of a federal transport van. Isaiah held up the case. "You killed a kid for this?" Harrison spat on the ground. "It was an accident. He fell." "We'll see what the autopsy review says," Isaiah replied coldly. "Dunning told us everything, Brett. How you hit him with your baton when he wouldn't let go of the neck. That's not an accident. That's felony murder." Harrison's face crumbled. "I want a deal. I can give you the chief. I can give you the DA. They knew. They took a cut." Isaiah leaned in close, his voice a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "You can sing all you want, Harrison, but you're not the conductor of this orchestra anymore. You're just the instrument." The arrest of Officer Brett Harrison was the first domino in a chain reaction that would threaten to level the entire power structure of Creekwood County. But the true devastation didn't happen in the streets. It happened 6 months later, inside the sterile, mahogany-walled pressure cooker of the federal courthouse in Mobile, Alabama. The trial of United States of America versus Brett Harrison had become a national spectacle. The gas station incident had touched a raw nerve across the country, sparking debates about police overreach and stolen valor. By the time the trial began, the courthouse steps were a sea of news vans, protesters, and curious onlookers, all waiting to see the fall of the man who had picked a fight with the wrong Navy SEAL. Inside Courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was suffocating. Commander Isaiah Sterling sat in the front row of the gallery, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. He wasn't in uniform today. He wore a charcoal grey suit that fit his frame like armor. Next to him sat his wife, Sarah, her hand resting firmly on his arm. Behind them, clutching a packet of tissues and the returned vintage Gibson guitar case, were the parents of Ethan Cole. They looked like people who had been holding their breath for a year, waiting to finally exhale. At the defense table, Brett Harrison looked like a man who had already died. The transformation was shocking. The arrogant, gum-chewing bully who had sneered at Isaiah on the roadside was gone. In his place sat a husk. Harrison had lost 40 pounds. His skin was pasty, his eyes darting nervously around the room, searching for a friendly face. There were none. His wife had filed for divorce the week after the indictment. The police union had cut him loose the moment the federal RICO charges dropped. Even his former drinking buddies from the force were nowhere to be found, mostly because half of them were cutting plea deals to save themselves. Harrison wore a bright orange federal jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His ankles were shackled. He looked small. The presiding judge was the Honorable Eleanor Vance. Judge Vance was a legend in the Southern legal circuit, a woman with steel-gray hair and a reputation for incinerating public officials who betrayed the public trust. When she entered the courtroom, the silence was absolute. The trial lasted 3 agonizing weeks. It was a slow, methodical dismantling of Harrison's life. The prosecution, led by a shark-like assistant U.S. attorney, didn't just go after the assault on Isaiah. They painted a picture of a criminal enterprise disguised as a police department. The star witness against Harrison was none other than his former partner, Kyle Dunning. When Dunning took the stand, he refused to look Harrison in the eye. He wept openly as he described the toy box, the storage unit where Harrison hoarded the spoils of his highway robbery. He called it fishing, Dunning told the jury, his voice trembling. He'd spot a car with out-of-state plates. He'd say, "Let's see what they have." If they had cash, jewelry, anything of value, he'd find a reason to arrest them. He'd offer to drop the charges if they signed a property forfeiture waiver. People were scared. They just wanted to go home, so they signed. "And what happened on the night Ethan Cole died?" the prosecutor asked. The courtroom went deathly still. "Harrison wanted the guitar," Dunning whispered, wiping his eyes. "The kid, Ethan, he wouldn't let go of the case. He said it was his grandfather's. Harrison got mad. He hit him. He hit him with the baton, right on the temple. It wasn't an accident. Harrison didn't call the paramedics for 20 minutes because he was too busy loading the guitar into his trunk." Harrison's lawyer, an overworked public defender, tried to object, but the damage was done. The jury looked at Harrison with undisguised revulsion. Then came the centerpiece of the trial, the dashcam footage. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. On the massive screens, the jury watched the encounter at Miller's Crossing play out. They saw Isaiah's calm. They saw his hands in the air. They heard Harrison's screeching, insecure rage. They watched as Harrison kicked a compliant, kneeling man in the back. The contrast was visceral. On one side, a warrior who had faced actual war and maintained his composure. On the other, a bully with a badge, terrified of his own shadow. When Isaiah took the stand, he dominated the room. He didn't speak with anger. He spoke with the cold precision of a tactician. "Commander," the prosecutor asked, "you are a trained Tier 1 operator. You could have physically disarmed Officer Harrison. Why didn't you?" Isaiah turned slowly to address the jury. "Because I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to give him a reason to kill me. If I had moved, I would be dead, and he would be a hero who stopped a violent suspect. I realized that the only way to win this war was to surrender the battle. I had to let him destroy himself. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. It was a speed that signaled a slaughter. When the foreman stood up, Harrison closed his eyes. We, the jury, find the defendant, Brett Harrison, guilty on count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law. Guilty on count 2, racketeering. Guilty on count 3, kidnapping. Guilty on count 4, second-degree murder. Guilty rang out 9 times, a perfect score. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for a month later. When the day came, Harrison was given the chance to speak. He stood up, shaking violently, tears streaming down his face. Your Honor, Harrison sobbed, his voice cracking. I just wanted to be a good cop. I got lost. The job. It hardens you. I didn't mean for the boy to die. I'm sorry. Please, I have a son. Don't take my life away. Judge Vance lowered her reading glasses. She looked at Harrison, not with anger, but with a terrifying, clinical disappointment. Mr. Harrison, she began, her voice echoing off the high ceiling, you didn't get lost. You built a map to hell and followed it, joyfully. You took the badge, a symbol of safety for the vulnerable, and turned it into a weapon of greed and terror. You hunted innocent travelers like they were prey. She shuffled the papers on her bench. You targeted Commander Sterling because you thought he was weak. You mistook his discipline for submission. You found out, too late, that he was stronger than you could ever imagine. But your worst crime wasn't your arrogance. It was the theft of a life. You killed Ethan Cole for a piece of wood and 6 strings. Judge Vance looked at the federal sentencing guidelines. For the charge of racketeering, I sentence you to 20 years. For the deprivation of civil rights, 10 years. For the murder of Ethan Cole, 28 years. The courtroom gasped. Harrison's lawyer dropped his pen. These sentences are to run consecutively. Judge Vance slammed her gavel down, the sound like a gunshot. That is a total of 58 years in federal prison. You will not be eligible for parole until you are an old man, Mr. Harrison. You have taken years from others. Now the law takes them from you. Marshals, take him away. Harrison's knees buckled. He let out a wail that was barely human. 2 U.S. Marshals had to hook him under the armpits and drag him out. As he was hauled past the gallery, his feet dragging on the carpet, he looked frantically at the audience, searching for pity. He locked eyes with Isaiah. Isaiah didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply offered a slow, solemn nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the final confirmation of defeat. As the side doors slammed shut on Harrison's life, the tension in the room broke. Ethan Cole's mother turned to Isaiah and buried her face in his chest, sobbing. "Thank you," she whispered. "We thought he got away with it. You brought him to justice." "No, Mom," Isaiah said softly, holding her gently. "Ethan did. I just opened the door." Outside the courthouse, the air was hot and bright. Agent Reynolds was waiting for Isaiah at the bottom of the steps. "It's a clean sweep," Reynolds said, lighting a cigarette. "The district attorney just resigned. He's taking a plea deal, 5 years for obstruction. The police chief is getting 10. The department is being gutted." "Good," Isaiah said, putting on his sunglasses. "So," Reynolds asked, exhaling a cloud of smoke, "what now, Commander? Back to the teams? Or are you going to retire and play golf?" Isaiah looked at his wife, Sarah. He looked at the cameras setting up for his statement. He thought about the town of Creekwood, a place that was broken, a place that needed fixing, not by outsiders, but by someone who understood the weight of authority. "I'm retiring from the Navy next month," Isaiah said. Private security? Reynolds guessed. Big money in that. Isaiah smiled, a dangerous glint returning to his eye. No. I'm thinking of running for office. Mayor? No, Isaiah said, looking at the sheriff's star on a passing deputy's uniform. I'm running for sheriff of Creekwood County. Someone needs to clean up the mess, and I've got a lot of free time. The federal penitentiary known as USP Coleman-Thursedexid is a fortress of concrete and misery rising out of the humid Florida landscape. It is a high-security facility designed for the most dangerous and violent offenders in the federal system. But for former Officer Brett Harrison, the danger didn't come from the walls or the guards. It came from every direction. As a disgraced cop, a man who had used his badge to prey on the innocent, Harrison was marked for death the moment he stepped off the transport bus. To keep him alive, the administration had placed him in the Special Housing Unit, SHU, protective custody. It was a sterile, terrifying euphemism for solitary confinement. For 23 hours a day, Harrison sat in a 6-by-8-foot cell. The walls were painted a maddening shade of off-white. The air smelled perpetually of industrial disinfectant and stale sweat. There was no window to the outside world, only a narrow slit in the heavy steel door that looked out into a fluorescent-lit corridor. 2 years into his 58-year sentence, Harrison had withered. The swaggering, gum-chewing bully who had terrorized motorists on Route 9 was gone. In his place was inmate 999402, a gaunt, hollow-eyed ghost of a man. He had lost 50 pounds. His skin was pasty from a lack of sunlight, and his once thick hair was thinning rapidly, falling out in clumps due to stress and malnutrition. He spent his days staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment he decided to pull over the black truck. He replayed it 1,000 times, screaming silently at his memory, begging his past self to just drive away. It was a Tuesday evening when the slot in his door slid open. It wasn't mealtime. It was his scheduled recreation. 1 hour alone in a chain-link cage, slightly larger than his cell, exposed to the open air, but separated from all other humans. As Harrison shuffled into the cage, blinking against the harsh Florida sun, he saw another inmate sweeping the concrete walkway nearby. It was Bernie, an elderly fraudster doing time for a Ponzi scheme. He was one of the few inmates who wouldn't try to kill Harrison on sight. "Hey, 402, Bernie grunted, not looking up from his broom, keeping his voice low to avoid the guard's attention. "Big day for your hometown. Saw the papers in the library?" Harrison's heart hammered against his ribs. He had no contact with the outside world. His wife had divorced him 6 months into his term. His parents had stopped writing. "What? What happened?" Harrison rasped, his voice gravelly from disuse. Bernie checked the guard tower, then slid a folded, crumpled section of the mobile press register under the bottom of the chain-link fence. "You might want to sit down for this one, kid." Harrison snatched the paper with trembling hands. He unfolded it, the newsprint crinkling in the silence. The headline was bold, black, and screamed a truth that felt like a physical punch to the gut. "Landslide victory. Sterling elected sheriff of Creekwood County." Harrison's breath hitched. He stared at the color photograph beneath the headline. It was Commander Isaiah Sterling. But he wasn't wearing his Navy dress blues. He was standing on the steps of the county courthouse, his hand raised, taking the oath of office. He wore the tan and brown uniform of the High Sheriff, a gold star pinned to his chest, a star that shone with genuine authority, unlike the tin shield Harrison had tarnished. Harrison's eyes frantically scanned the article, desperate to find some flaw, some scandal. There was none. In a record turnout, Creekwood County voters have overwhelmingly elected retired Navy SEAL Isaiah Sterling as their new sheriff. Running on a platform of transparency and reform, Sterling defeated the interim incumbent by a 40-point margin. "We are closing the book on the era of corruption," Sterling announced in his victory speech. "We are returning the badge to the people." Harrison read on, his stomach churning with nausea. The article detailed Sterling's first acts as sheriff-elect. He had fired the remaining deputies loyal to the old regime. He had promoted Kyle Dunning, the rookie who had testified against Harrison, to chief deputy. Dunning, the traitor, was now second in command, praised in the article as a whistleblower with integrity. But the final blow was in the last paragraph. Sheriff Sterling also announced that the seizure storage facility on Route 9, formerly used to house assets stolen by corrupt officers, has been fully liquidated. The proceeds were used to refund victims. The building itself has been gutted and renovated. Next month, it will reopen as the Ethan Cole Community Music Center, a free school for underprivileged youth, named in honor of the young musician whose death sparked the federal investigation. Harrison dropped the paper. It fluttered to the concrete floor of the cage. He sank to his knees, gripping the chain-link fence until his knuckles turned white. The storage unit, his toy box, his kingdom, the place where he had felt like a god deciding who kept their property and who didn't, was gone. It was being turned into a shrine for the boy he had killed. The world wasn't just punishing him, it was erasing him. His legacy of fear had been paved over, replaced by music and justice. He let out a low, guttural sob, resting his forehead against the cold metal of the fence. He was buried alive, and the man he had tried to destroy was the one holding the shovel. 500 miles north, the sun was setting over Creekwood, Alabama. The humidity had broken, leaving the evening air crisp and clean, as if the town itself had been washed of its sins. Sheriff Isaiah Sterling stood on the podium outside the newly renovated precinct. The good old boys network that had strangled this county for decades was dead. The corrupt district attorney was serving 5 years. The former chief was destitute. The rot had been cut out. Isaiah looked out at the crowd. It was a sea of faces, black, white, rich, poor. For the first time in the town's history, they weren't looking at the police with fear. They were looking with hope. In the front row stood Sarah, his wife, holding the hands of their 2 daughters. Next to them stood the parents of Ethan Cole, tears streaming down their faces, clutching the vintage Gibson guitar that Isaiah had returned to them. Isaiah stepped to the microphone. The applause died down to a reverent silence. 2 years ago, Isaiah's voice boomed, deep and resonant. I was told to get on the ground right here in this town. I was told I didn't belong. I was told that power gives you the right to take what isn't yours. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, locking eyes with young Leo, the teenager who had filmed the arrest, who was now interning at the local paper. But I learned a long time ago in the Navy that power is a burden, not a prize, Isaiah continued. The badge is not a shield to hide behind. It is a weight you carry for others. Today, we don't just put on new uniforms. We put on a promise. If you are an officer who thinks this star makes you a king, turn it in today. Because if you stay and you break the public trust, I won't just fire you, I will come for you. The cheer that erupted was deafening, echoing off the brick buildings, a sound of liberation. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the bunting was taken down, Isaiah drove his personal truck, the same black Ford F-150, to the edge of town. He pulled into Miller's Crossing. Martha was still there behind the counter, wiping down the glass. She smiled warmly when she saw him. "Evening, Sheriff," she called out. "Coffee's fresh." "Evening, Martha," Isaiah smiled, dropping a $5 bill in the tip jar. "Keep the change." He walked outside and stood by pump number 4, the spot, The exact square of concrete where he had been forced to his knees, humiliated and handcuffed. The oil stain was gone, scrubbed away by time and rain. The ghosts were gone. He took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. He took out his phone and dialed a number he had saved for this specific moment. USP Coleman, Warden's office, a voice answered. "This is Sheriff Sterling from Creekwood County," Isaiah said, his voice calm and steady. "Sheriff Sterling," the warden's tone shifted to immediate respect. "Congratulations on the election. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling regarding inmate 999402, Brett Harrison." "I have his file right here, Sheriff. He's struggling. He put in another request this morning for a transfer to a lower security unit. He claims the isolation of the SHU is causing him psychological distress. He says he can't handle the silence." Isaiah looked at the horizon, where the sun was painting the Alabama sky in bruised purples and golds. He thought about the silence of the grave where Ethan Cole lay. He thought about the silence his wife had endured waiting for his call. "Deny the request, Warden," Isaiah said softly. "Sir?" "He stays in the box," Isaiah said, his voice hard as steel. "He wanted to be the law. Now he can live with the consequences of it. Tell him the sheriff sends his regards." "Understood, Sheriff. Request denied." Isaiah hung up the phone. He slid it into his pocket, climbed into his truck, and started the engine. The rumble of the V8 was a comforting sound. He put the truck in gear and pulled out onto the road, driving toward the lights of the town he now protected. The long nightmare of Creekwood was finally over. Justice had not just been served, it had been finalized. If this story got your blood boiling and your heart racing, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think? Was 58 years enough for what Harrison did, or did he deserve more? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories where karma hits back hard, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.